Ah, sweet, sweet canyon. It's a pretty simple course with a pleasant aesthetic and soundtrack. Beyond that, well, there's really not much more to say about it, to be honest. There's not a lot of crazy strategies you're going to have to learn to figure out how this course works, but it is the first instance of a track with split paths, and it's also the first course we've encountered where the build I'm going to recommend is not what's currently used in world record runs. Welcome to part 3 of Basic Training, where we're going to cover everything you need to know about Sweet Sweet Canyon on 150cc. As always, we're going to cover the recommended builds, mushroom strats, and other advanced tips and tricks to help you start mastering the course. And if you find this type of content useful, drop a like and hit the notification bell since I try to upload a new video every week. With all that out of the way, let's jump right into it. The recommended build for this course is going to be Dry Bowser, Wild Wiggler, Leaf Tires, and Paper Glider. This build has a mini turbo of 3.75 and a ground speed of 4, so this build puts more or less equal weight on ground speed and mini turbo. Now it's important to point out that the world record actually uses Baby Daisy, Bitty Buggy, Azure Rollers, and Cloud Glider. This build has a ground speed of 0.75, which is the lowest possible ground speed in the entire game. However, it makes up for this by having a mini turbo stat of 4.75, which is the highest possible mini turbo stat in the game. So the world record goes balls to the wall in favor of mini turbo over ground speed, and saves at least a second over the build I'm recommending. So why are we not using the Baby Daisy build if it's faster? This touches on a couple of really important points, so first of all, let me reiterate that the point of these videos is not to take people who have never touched the game and turn them into world record holders. If we take a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being absolute beginner and 10 being a world record contender status, then what I'm trying to do with these videos is provide tips and tricks for anyone between about a 1 and a 7. Baby strats are probably up there around a 9.5 or so. The reason for this is that going all in on mini turbo basically forces you to build up mini turbos at every possible point on the track to save time. And as you can probably tell just from watching the world record ghost here, sometimes this requires you to do a ton of hops and double hops just to make sure you've got a good enough line to build up the mini turbos in the first place. It also requires that you've absolutely mastered drifting in this game. I've got an entire 13-minute video explaining in detail how drifting works, and even I'm not at the level where I'm able to start making use of those strats effectively. So basically, on any course where the world record uses baby strats, I'm going to suggest that you absolutely do not do that, with maybe the one exception being Neo Bowser City, since that course can be difficult to stay on the track even on 150cc. Now you may have noticed that we've spent almost 2 minutes just talking about the recommended build and haven't even started talking about the course itself yet. Fear not, this course is actually pretty straightforward and shouldn't take that long for you to figure out. You take the first 2 turns relatively tight, build up an MT around the first turn and an SMT around the second turn, and then grab the 2 coins on the right hand side of the track. Once you've done this, prepare for pretty much the only real advanced strat of the run, which is called Fast Glider. I go over how all this works in my advanced tips and tricks video, but basically, this glider is one example of a cannon glider that shoots you across a large gap at high speeds. The max speed here isn't actually reached until after your glider is fully out, so if you hop slightly before you get to the ramp, you should be able to land on top of it, which pulls your glider out much faster and saves about 1/10 of a second over tricking for each lap. After you've done that, hold up and right on the joystick so that you can be as close to the right side of the track as possible here, since this allows you to take the turn as tight as possible. You're going to want a neutral drift for most of the turn here, and you won't be able to build up a UMT until the very end of the turn. Now, the blue path is actually slightly faster, but I personally feel like the pink path is more consistent, so that's the way that I recommend you go. Note that you'll probably want to at least try and hit up the blue path on lap 2 so that you can get your last couple of coins. So, once we're on the pink path, drift around the chocolate frosting here, build up an SMT, and then do 2 hops to the left to get a good line before the upcoming ramp. One thing to point out here is that you'll see that I do a little hop to the left before taking the ramp. This is actually pretty important, as it causes you to land on the ground slightly angled, which basically lets you keep a really tight line before the upcoming shortcut. Make sure to do the trick off the ramp as close to the left side of the ramp as possible. If you're taking the blue path, it's more or less symmetric to the pink path, and you're just going to want to take the trick as close to the right side wall as possible, but you still want to make sure to do a left hand hop before you do that. After that, snag the coins here, and build up an MT. Then you release it, start another left drift, and then shroom for the donut here. Ideally, you're going to want to build up an SMT here, but it can be a bit tricky to do, and it doesn't really cost you that much time if you miss it. Another point to note is that when you start the left drift here, you're going to want to hold a hard right to get a really wide drifting angle before you shroom. To be safe, don't start turning left until you're basically through the donut. Laps 2 and 3 are more or less exactly the same as lap 1, except at the start, you're going to want to get the 2 coins on the left hand side at the start of the lap. If you choose to, you're also going to want to take the blue path on lap 2 to get your last coin. Other than that, like I said at the top of the video, this is a pretty straightforward course, so let's see how this all looks in a full run. That's pretty much going to be it for me, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for the next week's video where we're going to go over Thwomp Ruins.